This just in, a big loss for Blake Lively, as the judge has dismissed one of the defendants from her lawsuit. But it does come with a catch. Also, a Hollywood icon is sticking up for Justin Baldoni.
The social pressures were there, but I never felt like I belonged, which is something that I still struggle with. And I think has become one of the greatest blessings in disguise. Like I felt like an outsider. Like I would walk into a party and I would want to fit in.
Just when it seemed like Blake Lively was tightening her grip on a sweeping legal case over an alleged smear campaign, the entire strategy hit a wall, literally. A federal judge just tossed out one of her key targets, media strategist Jed Wallace. The reason? He never should have been part of this lawsuit in the first place. Not in New York, at least. According to the judge, Wallace has no meaningful connection to the state, no business ties, no property, and no proof that anything he allegedly did to damage Lively's reputation ever happened there. That detail alone was enough to get him dismissed. But this isn't just about paperwork or legal technicalities. Wallace was central to Lively's accusation that a coordinated online assault was launched against her, one that allegedly tanked her brand and reputation. With him out of the case, that entire conspiracy theory starts to wobble. And let's be real, if the man she claimed orchestrated the takedown can't even be sued in the state she filed in, what does that say about the strength of her claims? This ruling doesn't just chip away at her case, it threatens to blow the whole thing wide open.
For Blake. Now, it comes with a catch, as I said, because it was done without prejudice, which means she can refile, which is annoying because he didn't give that same liberty to Justin.
I am also just like everybody else in the sense that I take on more than I can chew. I overcommit. I say yes to things out of fear. I people please.
The court's decision wasn't based on opinions or media narratives. It came down to cold, hard jurisdiction. In simple terms, the judge ruled that New York has no legal right to put Jed Wallace on trial. Why? Because Wallace lives and works in Texas. His company is based there. He doesn't own property in New York, doesn't do business there, and hasn't even stepped foot in the state more than a handful of times since the 90s. And here's the kicker. Blake's legal team couldn't show a single concrete example of Wallace taking action from New York, in New York, or directly aimed at New York. Not one. That's a problem when you're accusing someone of launching a reputation-killing campaign in that very state. Courts don't just take people's word for it, they want receipts. And apparently Lively didn't bring any. The judge even noted that the supposed smear campaign was more visible outside New York and that Wallace didn't appear to even know about the specific actions taken by others. In legal terms, that's called a jurisdictional collapse. In plain English, her case lost one of its loudest voices, and maybe its loudest threat, before it even got to trial.
But Jed Wallace and Street Relations, they were the ones who sort of were accused of doing the dirty deeds of the retaliation campaign, the untraceable acts across Reddit and so on. He denies this. He says none of that happened. We'll go through what he says in a second. But Blake was accusing him of being hired by Tag PR, etc., to do a lot of the dirty retaliation tactics that she's saying was all their fault and nothing was her fault.
Blake Lively's lawsuit painted Jed Wallace as the mastermind behind a covert digital war, allegedly leading an invisible army of bots, influencers, and content creators to destroy her image. But when Wallace finally spoke up, the picture looked completely different. According to his sworn declaration, he wasn't running any secret campaign. In fact, he says his role was passive, strictly to monitor online trends and advise a private client on public perception. He claims he never posted, never hired anyone to post, never directed anyone to attack Blake, and certainly never ran a digital army. The court took a hard look at the facts and agreed there was no evidence Wallace ever crossed the line into direct action. He didn't amplify anything. He didn't even comment on her. The few emails and communications that Blake's team pointed to weren't enough to prove he was part of some grand scheme. Worse, his recommendations at the time were reportedly to do nothing. Let the media storm pass. So, if the man she accused of orchestrating this online takedown says he didn't lift a finger and the court believes him, then how much of this smear campaign theory still holds up? One of the biggest questions raised by this ruling is, why did Blake Lively file this lawsuit in New York at all? The judge even seemed puzzled by that choice. Most of the people involved, Justin Baldoni, Melissa Nathan, Jed Wallace, live and work in California or Texas. The film was shot in New Jersey. The alleged retaliation happened online. So what made New York the legal battleground? The answer might lie in a maneuver critics are calling a legal loophole. According to court watchers, Blake allegedly used a New York subpoena to quietly access private phone data from a key player without notifying them, a move that likely wouldn't have flown in California, where privacy protections are much tighter. In California, a subpoena like that would have required notifying the person whose data was being targeted, but by going through New York and using what some are calling a shell action, Blake may have avoided that step entirely. Now, with the court scrutinizing her jurisdictional claims, it's starting to look like the entire case may have been built on shaky legal ground. If her strategy was to sidestep tougher laws, this dismissal could mark the beginning of a much bigger unraveling. The judge didn't just rule against Blake, he raised eyebrows at how she's been handling the case. From her jurisdiction choices to her legal tactics, there's now an undercurrent of skepticism surrounding her entire approach. One of the key issues? Blake is accusing a group of people, Wallace, Nathan, Abel, and others, of operating a coordinated takedown campaign. But the more the court examined her claims, the more it found gaps, contradictions, and missing links. For example, Wallace was supposedly central to the operation, yet he had no documented connection to some of the alleged co-conspirators and no awareness of what they were doing. The judge pointed out that if Wallace didn't even know about the actions others were taking, how could he be part of a conspiracy? That kind of legal stretch makes her whole case feel more like a theory than a solid claim. And while other defendants remain in the lawsuit, the cracks are becoming harder to ignore. With Wallace out, the domino effect could kick in, especially if others follow his lead and question the court's authority to hear the case. What began as a lawsuit about harassment and retaliation is starting to look like a chess game that's losing momentum fast. One of the strangest parts of Blake Lively's lawsuit is the timeline. It just doesn't make sense. She claims the retaliation campaign against her began in May 2023, months after she allegedly spoke out about misconduct on set. But according to the court, none of the supposed conspirators took any meaningful action until long after the movie wrapped and buzz about the film had already died down. If this was truly a coordinated attempt to silence her, why wait over a year to strike? That delay alone casts serious doubt on the idea of an ongoing, targeted smear effort. The judge noticed it too, calling out the lack of logical connection between her harassment claims and the supposed digital attacks that followed. Even more confusing, she points to specific dates in August and February when negative media coverage spiked, but that coincided with her own public announcements, like the movie release and the lawsuit filing itself. It's the classic chicken or the egg problem. Was she targeted, or was the attention a reaction to her own actions? The lack of clear cause and effect weakens the entire conspiracy theory. And without a convincing timeline, even her most dramatic accusations start to feel like guesswork. Blake Lively's legal team leaned hard on a controversial argument that Jed Wallace should be held accountable not for what he did personally, but for what others allegedly did, because they were all in on it together. It's called conspiracy jurisdiction, and it's as tricky as it sounds. The idea is that if one person in a conspiracy takes action in a certain state, everyone in that group can be pulled into court there, even if they never set foot in that state themselves. But there's a catch. The court needs proof that each person knew about the other's actions and somehow benefited from them. And that's where Blake's case fell flat. The judge said her complaint failed to show that Wallace had any idea what his alleged co-conspirators were doing in New York or that their actions were done on his behalf. There wasn't even a single message or meeting that linked him directly to anything happening in the state. Without that connection, the whole conspiracy jurisdiction theory falls apart. It's not enough to say people are connected, you have to prove they were working together. And in this case, the court says Blake simply didn't. Behind all the legal jargon, one thing is clear. The judge doesn't seem entirely convinced by Blake Lively's claims. He didn't just dismiss Wallace for technical reasons, he openly questioned whether any of her evidence actually holds weight. For example, Blake claims she could prove Wallace was involved in the smear campaign, but never produced the proof, even after months of discovery. The judge noted that if she had something concrete, she should have brought it forward by now. Instead, her legal filings were filled with vague accusations and speculative timelines. Worse, her opposition didn't even fully address key legal standards, like the long-arm statute, something any solid case would have nailed. It was a glaring oversight. The court also said there's no need for further discovery unless she can come back with actual evidence showing Wallace had contacts in New York and was aware of actions taken on his behalf. In short, the door is only half open, and Blake has nothing in her hand to push it through. This wasn't just a procedural loss, it was a subtle message from the bench that her claims, at least against Wallace, may be more smoke than fire. While Blake Lively's legal battle plays out in court, a surprising group has found itself caught in the crossfire: YouTubers, TikTokers, and online commentators. Several creators who've covered the case have reportedly received subpoenas demanding personal information, including subscriber data and financial details. The move sparked immediate backlash, with critics accusing Blake of trying to intimidate independent voices under the guise of legal discovery. And with Jed Wallace now officially removed from the lawsuit, it raises a key question. Was this digital dragnet really about seeking justice or silencing dissent? The court's decision to throw out Wallace's involvement pokes a major hole in Blake's theory that a coordinated online smear campaign is still actively targeting her. If Wallace, the alleged mastermind, is no longer part of the case, the justification for snooping into creators' accounts becomes even flimsier. It also sets a chilling precedent. If public figures can demand private data from commentators simply for talking about court filings and public stories, it could reshape how creators cover legal drama. For now, though, this ruling might give those subpoenaed a little more breathing room and a stronger case to push back. With Jed Wallace officially out of the picture, Blake Lively now faces a strategic crossroads. The judge's ruling leaves her two options: try to refile the case against Wallace in Texas where he lives and works, or drop him entirely from the lawsuit and move forward without him. But both paths are risky. Refiling in Texas would force Blake to acknowledge the court's jurisdiction, which could expose her to counterclaims or weaken her position in the broader case. Dropping Wallace, on the other hand, would punch a gaping hole in her narrative. After all, he was supposed to be the architect of the alleged digital takedown. Without him, the foundation of her conspiracy argument looks thin. And even if she tries to rework the complaint, the court has already made it clear. Unless she can produce new, solid evidence linking Wallace to activity in New York, the door won't open again. This ruling may not end the lawsuit altogether, but it's a powerful reminder that even in the world of celebrity litigation, accusations need more than drama. They need proof. Now the spotlight is back on Blake. Will she press forward, pivot to Texas, or quietly let this part of the story fade away?